Hello and welcome to today's BigMarker demo. My name is Hannah and I'm the Director of Customer Success here at BigMarker. What you're looking at the screen now is a version of the BigMarker channel. And your BigMarker channel is your company or your organization's kind of overarching account for all of your webinar hosting activities that you do on BigMarker. So you'll notice here that we're kind of landed on the webinars section of this page. This is where all of my content is archived. So all of my recordings that I've hosted, all of my upcoming events, all of them will be listed in this channel in grid view that I can access at any point in time. You'll also notice in this section that I have a few channel hosts here on the right-hand side. And a channel host is somebody within your channel who can set up or create, schedule webinars under your channel account. So the first two channel hosts or host licenses are free with your BigMarker subscription. And any additional host licenses that you need to add are just $19 a month per host. The channel does have a secondary function as well. So in addition to being a place where all of your webinar content is stored, you can also build a subscriber list, use the discussion section and the calendar features to essentially continue the conversation between webinars with your audience members. Now, you don't have to utilize the channel in this way. If you want to keep it kind of an internal thing, you certainly can. But you do have that almost social media aspect to the channel that you are welcome to utilize as well. So what we've taken a look at so far is the channel, and that's kind of the macro view of your BigMarker account. On the micro level, we have all of your individual webinars. So let's set one up right now. In order to set up a webinar on BigMarker or schedule it, it's really easy to do. You'll notice this green schedule button pretty much anywhere on the site that all you have to do is click it to schedule a webinar. When you do that, you'll be brought to a page that allows you to give your webinar a title. Again, hosted by, that's just the channel. Webinar format, so we have a few different types of webinars that you can host. Live webinar is just a regular, run-of-the-mill webinar. An on-demand webinar is going to be, a previously recorded webinar that you can make available at any time for playback on your BigMarker channel. Automated webinar, which is essentially kind of like a live webinar, but it's a simu-live experience. So it's a pre-recorded webinar that you're essentially playing as a live experience. And then a 24/7 webinar, which is just an always open webinar room that you can jump into at any time and host wonderful webinars. From there, then you just want to select if your webinar will be public or private. The differences here being a public webinar is a webinar that's searchable on BigMarker and on other search engines like Google. If you want to keep your webinar private, people will either need the link to attend or you can manage your privacy settings later in the edit section, which we'll get to momentarily. Then you can add an about section to your webinar and even agenda topics. And once you click schedule, you'll actually populate a webinar landing page that looks very similar to this one. Now, this is a webinar landing page that I've set up for my webinar. One thing I want to note right off the bat is that this form, or this page rather, not only acts as a registration form for people to come and register for your webinar, but it's also the same link that people will use to enter the webinar when it's live. And also, if you choose to publish your recording, this is where your recording will live as well. So the link actually does not change throughout the entire life cycle of the webinar. And if you remember back to the channel in grid view, how we had all of those individual sessions, just by clicking on your channel section for your particular webinar will take you to this page. So the link doesn't change, it's always going to remain the same. And this is certainly a highly customizable page. As you can see below, I've added my about section, my agenda topic points, featured presenters. There's a lot of stuff that I can do in this webinar, but at the top, you'll also notice that I have this, very large kind of banner image. Now, what I can do is I can, if I want to use this template, I can just edit the page here and, add my own images for the background. But I can also add my images, and then if I want to change the template design, we have a ton of really, really great templates that you can use, in order to really make the webinar landing page look and feel as close to your own company branding and engagement as possible. So we have tons of templates to choose from. You can pick the one that works best for you. You can also kind of test out the ones that you like the best just by clicking select template or even previewing them. And if I preview a template with my image in a different format, it's going to show me how essentially that format will look, and I can kind of utilize whichever one is best for me. Now, if I go back to my landing page again, you'll notice that I have these 3 buttons at the top of the page. And what I had clicked previously was this Change Template button. But I have 2 other options as well. I can manage my webinar, and I can also edit my page. If I click Edit Page, again, that's going to allow me to edit the certain settings within the page. So I can, again, edit that image. I can edit things like the About section and the agenda topic points, etc. But I have a ton of other things that I can essentially manage within my webinar. So if I click that Manage Webinar button at the top of the screen, you'll see that I'm brought to essentially all of my editing tools around the webinar. So the first thing you'll notice is this editing toolbar at the top of the screen. I have a few sections here. So I have the Edit section, which allows me to edit the details of my webinar, privacy settings, set up tickets, all that kind of stuff, which we'll get to in a moment. The Design section, which again will take me to the templates and all of the design aspects of my webinar. Emails and invitations is where I can send really nice custom invitation emails and reminder emails for my webinars. And also the Manage Webinar and Integration sections as well. So the Manage Webinar section is my kind of default section as an admin. This is where all of my analytics will be, all of my kind of marketing and management tools. And then integrations, again, if I'm interested in integrating with my favorite tool, I can certainly set up a direct integration, or we also have a Zapier integration as well. So let's kind of get into the individual sections. First, I'm going to start with the Edit section. On this Edit section, again, you can do things like augment the webinar details. So if you want to change your webinar title or perhaps change the date and time, you can also, again, add your About webinars and agenda topics here. Also in this section, if you do want to add guest presenters. Now, guest presenters are different from channel hosts that we kind of covered in the channel section. You can add as many presenters as you want to your webinar. There's no additional fees or any costs associated with that. And to do this, all you have to do is click Add New Presenter. And when you do that, a form will pop up asking you to fill out some very basic details such as a name, bio, headshot, anything like that. But really the most important aspect of this section is to add a contact email address. So an email that you want to send to this presenter to essentially allow them to accept their invitation, and it also gives them it generates an automated personalized URL so that when that presenter clicks on that link, it's going to automatically log them into their BigMarker account and give them that presenter access to the page. So that's really important for making sure that your presenters will get in with that hosting capabilities. And once you're ready and have the kind of section looking like you want it to, you can save your changes and that will save to the webinar. Now, in the Edit section as well, we have the ability to sell tickets. Now, if you are interested in monetizing your webinars, to sell tickets is really easy to do on BigMarker. All you have to do is click on the Sell Tickets section. Then, all you have to do is select Paid Tickets or even the Donation button and select your price to attend live and also the price for people who did not purchase a live ticket to view the recording if you so choose. Now, once you set that ticket price up, the registration modal, when people register for your webinar, will also contain a credit card form where people can enter payment information in order to purchase a ticket. Now, what will happen from there is you can set up a PayPal account in your channel treasury. So back on the channel section in your settings tab, you'll have a treasury section where you can then set up that PayPal account and withdraw your funds after the webinar has been hosted. So all of the ticketing is done on BigMarker, and you can take advantage of that all on this platform. Finally, in this section, we have the privacy section. So again, you can select if your webinar is public or private and make those additional privacy settings here as well. You'll also notice that you have a recording permissions section in this section. So you'll want to, if you want to limit the access to the recording, for example, you want to make those changes here. In the next section, I want to go to design. Now, we've already kind of covered this section with the actual template and the images, but there is another section in this area that I want to call out, and that's conference room branding. So if you want to add your own logo to the live webinar instead of having the BigMarker be in the top left-hand corner, simply click Change Logo and add your own logo to this section. Then you can also change the theme color to the top banner of your webinar screen. And once you're ready and have this kind of theme set up, you can actually even save it as default. So each webinar you host will automatically generate these settings for it. Finally, in this section, we have the webinar preview card. And if you remember back to the channel, that image that was in grid view on my webinar section of the page, this image is editable and you can add whatever image you like here. Also, if you share your webinar URL on social media, for example, how it has that preview image that shows up, this is the image that will display there as well. So you'll want to make any changes that you want here, or you can choose one of our stock images and upload one of those as well. So the next section I want to cover is the emails and invitations section. And the good news here is that if you've used any other email tool out there, it's pretty much the same exact experience. So to set up an invitation on BigMarker, it's really easy to do. All you have to do is click New Invitation, add the list, so the contact list that you want to share the invitation with, and then all you have to do after that is, if you would like to manage the actual content and the design of the email, you just set that up, and then you can send it or schedule that email for a later time. Now, below the invitations, you'll also notice that we have reminders and notifications set up for your webinar. Now, the default settings for a registrant for your BigMarker webinar, they will receive a registration confirmation email and 2 reminder emails as well. So a 24-hour reminder and a 30-minute reminder before the webinar starts. Now, you can choose to add more of these emails. You can edit the content within these emails just by clicking the edit button or turning them on or off. You can even delete certain emails as well. I personally don't recommend deleting all of these emails. You can certainly edit these to your liking, but they do all contain a very important link. It's a personalized login link within these emails. So if you do want to send your own, email support@bigmarker.com and ask how to essentially set that up, and we'll be able to help you with that. Otherwise, if you're happy with the way that these look, then I definitely suggest sending these with BigMarker. We also have a few other notification emails already kind of set up as well. We have a recording published notification and also a webinar feedback survey. So if you want to, again, edit these or turn them off, you certainly can do so, but these are the automated settings for your webinar. The next section we have is the Manage Webinar section. And as the title kind of states, this is the section where you can essentially manage all of your webinar activity, as well as also managing the content within your webinar using the Preload section. So what I want to cover first is the dashboard here, which is where we automatically land when we come to our webinar page. This is where we have our webinar URL, which is this kind of section here that can be copied and sent out wherever. This is just the generic link for your webinar. So if you want to send this to anyone to register for your webinar, maybe you want to share it on social media or in a newsletter or a blog post or wherever you want to send it, this is the cleanest form of the link. You just click copy and you can send it wherever you like. Below this section, you'll notice that we have all of our analytics. So registration analytics, we can see if people have opened the email invitations that we've sent, have clicked on them, have registered from the email, or if they've registered just by clicking on that link that you've shared with them and registering from the page. You'll see your sign-up rates, and then also, once the webinar has happened, you'll see the show-up rate as well. And if I click into the webinar stats, this is the kind of after the post-webinar statistics, if you will. You'll see the number of people registered, the number of people who actually attended, the show-up rate, session length, average time in room, and you'll also see really important engagement statistics as well. So this is kind of a graph that shows attendance and engagement by minute. But if you scroll to the very bottom of this section, you'll also see on a per attendee basis how long people are in the webinar room for, so the duration, and then also how long they're actually engaged for. So the difference here being how long are people actually on the tab of your webinar for. If they're off doing other things like checking their email or Facebook or whatever, that's going to take away from their overall engaged time, but it's not going to affect the duration. So for example, if somebody is in your webinar for 45 minutes, but they're only engaged for 20 minutes, you can expect that for 25 minutes, they're off doing other stuff. So you can actually check out those engagement stats on a per attendee basis and on a global basis for your webinar, and really you can use those statistics to essentially augment your webinars for the future. Maybe you'll want to add more polls or more Q&A sessions or anything like that to get more engagement from your audience. You'll also get things like the chat, Q&A, and polling transcripts, and a lot of other really interesting information like attendance by browser, device, etc. Also on this dashboard, at the very bottom of the screen, you'll notice that we have an embed few widgets that you can utilize. So the first is an embed registration widget. This allows me, if I click it, to create and customize an embeddable widget that I can put onto my website for people to essentially register from my website. You can change the background color, button link, the image color, form only, which will display a little bit differently, or the image only. And then once you have the widget looking like you want it to, all you have to do is copy your embed code and you can put it right into your website. Now, you'll also notice from this section that I can embed my live webinar into my website, and this is a really cool feature as well. So if I want to do this, here we don't have a preview, it's just an iframe code that you can also embed into your website. And essentially what will happen is when your webinar goes live, if you have this embedded onto your website, people will be able to watch the webinar as it's happening live on your website. Now, also in this section, I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the list and show you our preloadables, as I mentioned kind of previously. So we have essentially 4 sections that you can preload. So all of the content that you would share during your webinar, you can pre-upload it before your webinar room is live. So the first thing we have here is a pop-up offer. If you want to preload a pop-up offer that you can trigger during your webinar, all you have to do is click Add Offer. And again, an editor will pop up. So you can either decide between our horizontal layout, our vertical layout, or even a custom embed or HTML form that you've coded yourself. And you can essentially change all of the information here. So teaser, headline, price, discounted price, button text. But essentially at the end of the day, all you're doing is sending people to another link. So you can put whatever you want in the button link. Perhaps it's, a buy now. Perhaps it's a free ebook, whatever you want to put here. It's completely customizable. You can get it looking and feeling how you want it to, and then you can click Save Pop-up and send that out during your live webinar. You'll also notice in this preload section that we can preload files and videos, as well as handouts and polls. So in the files and videos section, you can preload your presentations, so any kind of slideshows, files, images, whatever you want to share during your webinar, and also videos that you can share during your webinar. So you can either share MP4 videos or YouTube videos on BigMarker. Now, you'll notice that we can preload these, but then we also can autoplay these videos. And this is a really important step, especially if you're planning to host an automated webinar. So the auto setting is no autoplay. But if you do automatically play or set an autoplay to your video, then it will automatically start playing at the scheduled start time of your webinar. You don't even have to be in the webinar room. It's just going to automatically generate that video, start it at the scheduled start time. And that's essentially how you create an automated webinar on BigMarker. You certainly don't have to autoplay. It's just always a good idea to preload your content so you don't have to load it on the fly at the start of your webinar. Finally, in this section, you can preload handouts. So any content that you want to share with your attendees, they can actually download those files. So a lot of times people will use it to send homework or the slides that they're sharing during their webinar. Lots of examples that we can share there. And then also preloading polls. So if you want to share multiple polls during your webinar, you can set those up and then you can poll them individually in the live webinar. Finally, we've covered the integration section a little bit. We have a lot of CRM and mail tools that you can utilize and really integrate with directly on BigMarker. Or again, if you want to integrate with our Zapier integration, you can essentially use it as a bridging software to integrate with pretty much any tool and BigMarker on the web. So the final piece of the puzzle, we've covered, the channel setup, we've covered the webinar creation and setup process. The final kind of piece here is actually hosting the live webinar. So to do that, I'm going to enter this webinar that I've already created. And what I'm going to show you right now is the webinar view as an admin, so as a host perspective, and then also what my audience will see. So what you're seeing right now is the blank state of the live webinar as I see it as a host. So this is my admin view of the webinar room. Now, there are 4 parts here that I have access to, and only 2 of which are what my audience will see. So what the attendees will see, and let me just populate this with some content here so you can kind of see. If I zoom in here, this is really what the attendee view will be. So they're seeing any content that I'm sharing here on the left-hand side. This is my kind of content section. So if I'm sharing any slideshows, videos, webcam, screen sharing, any kind of combination of that, all of that will display here in real time. So whatever I see as a host in this section is what my audience will see as well. And then my audience will also have access to this chat, people, poll, Q&A, and handouts section as well. These are the only 2 parts of the webinar experience that my audience will see. Now, as a host, I'm still seeing these sections, but I'm also seeing my host sharing toolbar here at the top right-hand corner of the screen. This is what allows me to share my microphone as I'm sharing right now. Also my webcam if I want to share microphone and webcam. My screen, so sharing my browser and my mouse movement in real time. And also files, videos, and those offer codes that we set up previously. So this is all of the content that can be preloaded. It can also be loaded on the fly, but I always, again, recommend pre-uploading it. And you'll notice that if I click into my files section, all of the preloaded files that I have, I can open at any time. I can also browse my computer and upload whatever I want. The same is true for videos and, again, the offer. So if I click the video section, I have my video queue, all of the videos that I've pre-uploaded. I can click play and they will, automatically jump up on the screen. Or I can add a YouTube link or also add videos on the fly as well. And then offer, when I'm ready to send out my offer code, all I have to do is click send offer, and that'll actually generate a pop-up on the screen for people to essentially, buy now or interact with that offer code. So that's my sharing toolbar at the top of the screen. And then finally, we have this host control panel here, which allows me to essentially control, the audience permissions, essentially all of the controls in the room. So you'll notice right off the bat that I have my audience tab, the record tab, which allows me to record my webinar, and my advanced settings as well, which are just kind of HD settings and things like that. In the audience tab, this is certainly, the more kind of robust section. So let's kind of cover this in a little bit of detail. You'll notice that we have 4 toggles that are auto turned to green or on at the scheduled start time of the webinar, and 2 that are auto turned off. So these are the automated settings. If you want to change any of these, you'll want to do it, early on so that these will take into effect during your webinar. The first 4 really kind of manage this chat section here. So first and foremost, we have show attendee list. If I want to hide from my attendees the number of attendees, so how many people are attending my webinar, or the list of attendees in the people tab, so not allow people to see who or how many people are in the room, all I have to do is click show attendee off, and then they will not be able, or show attendee list off, and they will not be able to see who is attending the webinar. Then we have the public chat. If I want to disable that, so not allow people to utilize the public chat to communicate, I can turn that off. And then finally, we have the Q&A settings as well. So the Q&A section is a little bit different from the chat. The chat is kind of a section that you can be used, for a multitude of reasons, to communicate with the host and, with each other and whatnot. But the Q&A section, this is a section that's specifically used for asking questions. If you want to disable it entirely, you certainly can. You can turn off the enable Q&A settings, and then they will not be able to submit questions. But if you keep this Q&A section on, but perhaps you don't want to allow your audience to see the questions being submitted, you can turn off the view Q&A, and then only you as the host and your guest presenters will be able to see these questions being submitted. But again, these are the 4 settings that are auto turned on, so any changes you want to make, you'll want to make those early on. Now, the 2 that are off by default, these are much more of a meeting tool than they are a webinar tool. What happens if I enable these is that all of my attendees at any point in time during my session will be able to enable their microphone or their webcam at any time. I don't recommend doing this for a webinar. It's certainly more of a meeting tool that I can utilize for small scale meetings where I want everyone to be able to share a microphone or webcam. Typically, I keep these off for my webinars, and instead, if I do want to allow any of my attendees to be able to share a microphone or webcam, you'll notice below here that we have the individual permissions section. And from here, you'll see all of your attendees listed out below, very similarly to how my name is listed in the admin section. And they'll have these exact same icons here with some slash marks through them. I can enable the microphone or webcam for individual people here rather than giving everyone access in the audience permissions section above. So if I want to just give a few people access rather than giving everyone access, I'll want to scroll down here and make those selections in the individual permissions section. Finally, a few engagement notes here. If you do want your attendees to be able to engage at any time, again, we have the handout section, the Q&A, polls. If you've set up polls, you can send those out. You'll also notice that below the chat window here, we have a little hand raising icon that if clicked, it will show on the chat and also in the attendees tab here below, who's raising their hand, who has a question. You'll also notice that there are some emojis that you can utilize, as well as a bullhorn to kind of call out certain people within the chat. So there's certainly a ton of things that you can do to not only host your webinar, but also engage your audience during the webinar as well. And if I go back here to my slideshow, you'll see that if I click through my slides, I can actually change my slides or update them in real time. So just as if I was hosting a live presentation in front of a live audience, this is the same environment on a BigMarker webinar. I can click through my slides and those will update for everyone in real time. So again, today we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered the channel and the channel setup and what the channel is used for on BigMarker. We've also covered how to schedule and set up a webinar on BigMarker. And then also we've covered the hosting experience on BigMarker. Thank you again for attending today's demo. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now. Thanks and happy hosting.